Okay, welcome to episode 2 of Tales from a Disappearing City. I'm back again with my good friend Ian, Blackmass Plastics.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, so like last episode we finished. I think you were packing up like all your troubles in your in your bag and like moving to London. Is that right?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I moved up to London in like what, early 91.
Yeah,
Um, but wasn't really going out to raves as such. I was like living in Stamford Hill, which at the time was like mainly like squats, brothels, and Orthodox Jews,
yeah.
and it was a crazy place. Um, and it was around the corner from the George Roby, where they had this night called Club Dog, which was like £3 to get in and played mental music, all kinds of stuff.
Do you know what? Actually, like, I'm just going back and slightly before you turned up. Like, end of the 80s, I was living in Finsbury Park for a little bit, 88, 89. And I used to go down the Roby just as Club Dog was starting. There'd literally be about 10 people with dreadlocks in there and all that sort of
And
stuff.
Shane McGowan off
Yeah,
his head.
yeah. Well, he's still down there, I think. But yeah, I do remember the start of it. Like I said, it was a few UV lights and all that. But yeah, going. So yeah, you started going out to what, Club Dog?
Yeah, and had like various like bands that were doing the circuit down there, who are all getting heavily influenced by what was going on in London at the time, in terms
Yeah.
of like clubs and raves and stuff. So things, dub, people who were playing dub were making it far more sort of psychedelic and whatnot. And like the Liberators used to play down there as well. They used to just bang out whatever, and yeah, it was just a really cheap, easy night out. And then I'd be going to sort of more kind of gig-based things that there was themselves becoming all-nighters and raves and stuff. And I remember the Shaman. This was like before Ease Are Good and all that.
Mm.
So doing nights down at the University of London Union, ULU, and various different places you see them. And they'd have like DJs and they'd play and whatnot. They had a really good selection of DJs playing. So they'd have Eddie Richards and Mr. C and Colin Favor. And so, there was a real crossover then between lots of different scenes. And it was pretty inevitable you were going to end up sort of getting drawn towards that kind of a sound, at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, but at the time my record buying was still really eclectic, and one of the guys I was living with was the elder brother of a really good friend of mine called Will, and he was right into music as well, buying
Yeah.
lots of
Shouts to
vinyl.
Will the Reverend. Yeah.
Yeah, and his brother Tom, who became a quite busy music journalist in dance music terms, was living upstairs, in the place I was living at in early 91. So we were like, it was a real sort of, sharing of sort of information and stuff about the music. I was just meeting an older bunch of people, because I was like in my late teens at that time, who were, going out and doing, big boy things. And it was good fun. So, yeah, so after that, I sort of decided that the job I was doing was too much like hard work, and that I should do what a lot of my mates were doing and go to poly. Well, go to uni, which in my case meant go to poly because I didn't have very many A levels or anything.
Yeah.
And ended up moving to Walthamstow
Yeah. I mean, that's Polytechnic for like those who aren't from the
Polytechnic,
UK.
yeah, which is
Yeah.
like college, not university. And
Yeah.
I went to a place called Thames Poly, which is now the University of City. What is it called? Greenwich University. It's called now.
Yeah.
University of Greenwich. But anyway, I didn't actually really go very often because pretty soon after I moved to Walthamstow, some mates of mine who lived in Plaistow in East London, who'd been pestering me for months and months to go to this club called the Labyrinth in Dalston, Kingsland. They eventually broke my resistance that I had for some reason to it. Don't know why. Well, I think I know why, because they all started listening to the music with like loads of pianos and singing in it, as well as some quite mental music as well that I really liked. But I was like, I'll go down there and check it out. And so yeah, I went down to Labyrinth one night in sort of mid 1991, and yeah, blew me away. Really incredible, legendary club, which a lot has been said about by lots of different people.
Yeah, have you seen the documentary about it? Like,
I'm not sure I have. I've read Billy Bunter's book about it, and
yeah, because the documentary is amazing. I think.
Is it about the Labyrinth, or is it about the?
No, it's about Four Aces, and it's about the guy who owned it.
Right.
I think they only do it like film showings at it. It's not online because they.
No, yeah, I remember it being shown at some.
Because I think the guy made it. Fair enough. He doesn't want it bootlegged, and wants to earn a bit of money back from it. So you can most of the time you had to actually go to a screening. So I finally went to a screening of it. But yeah, because the Four Aces there goes back to the early 70s, and one of the first places I lived when I moved out of my mum's place was Ballspawn Road in mid 80s, and I used to walk past there, the Four Aces, and like
when it was Rosebery's. Rosebery's is on Rosebery Avenue, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it was dub and reggae club for years, and in the documentary, literally everyone who's everyone in reggae has played at the Four Aces, and like it's famous as well, even back in the 70s, like people like John Lydon.
I was going to say it's got place in punk history as well.
Yeah, so yes, I mean, I know John Lydon said he used to go down there with sort of green hair, and like the Rastas didn't really care that there's this mad white guy in there listening to the dub. But yeah, it was just quite crazy that like I said, I can remember in '85 when Dalston was like really quiet on a Saturday night, and yeah, and just the reggae pounding out of there. That a few years later, obviously the Labyrinth, like the rave and hardcore, sort of moved in there.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty intense experience, and like and we were going there week in, week out for months and months, and at this time, Cool wasn't on air then, but Weekend Rush was a sort of main station that we could get in East London at the time, so we were like furiously like taping that, and just getting bang into it. There weren't any DJs in amongst the people that I live with, but there were fair, everyone was into buying vinyl and records and stuff, and actively like getting into the music. So it was like it was a real learning curve for me, because it's like going from being into like bands and some generally album based stuff and whatever, and you had EPs and whatever, into this whole idea of art. There's this whole other world of some evidently quite established producers, and totally like independent stuff that that still to this day you might not know the name of. So it was and at the time so much coming out that it was impossible to keep a track of it. You're like, oh, I like this one, but no idea what it is. And so like my main kind of sources for information about the music was the radio, and Colin Dale and Colin Favor, as you know, were on Kiss 100.3, wasn't it, at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the actual like frequency, but
they were on Kiss on.
But they were essential. They were essential listening for a few years.
Yeah, and they'd have good long show, and both Colin Dale and Colin Favor, they weren't like spring chickens. They both had backgrounds in non-hardcore kind of rave music, didn't they? Wasn't Colin Favor into proper like rare groove and soul and stuff?
Well, Colin Favor, I believe, he worked for Small Wonder at one point, who were the record label from Walthamstow that originally put out The Cure and stuff like that. And he was involved in lots of stuff in the late 70s, early 80s with like punk new wave sort of stuff. That's the sort of background that he come from. And to me, Colin Favor is one of the most criminally underrated DJs from the London sort of scene. That he got some recognition, but for instance, when I started going to like Heaven on a Wednesday night in 1985, Pyramid Club, which is meant to be the first club in the UK to play house music, and I'd hear this music. It was Colin Favor playing there in 1985, playing all these. He was the first one that I heard playing like weird Chicago house records and even early techno and stuff like that. And I think Mark Moore joined him as well. So he'd been out he'd been involved in like weird London underground scenes since, like you said, he's older since the late 70s, early 80s. So
Yeah,
yeah.
he had a really diverse taste in the music as well.
Yeah, he'd come through all this. He'd come through the new wave sort of stuff where that
Yeah.
was part of the thing, wasn't it? So
A bit. Between him and Colin Dale was a bit like an electronic music John Peel. You know what I mean? They'd play all kinds of different stuff. I mean, there were distinct differences in that Colin Dale were playing quite a lot of what he called abstract dance, which is quite often it'd be some of the labels that I was familiar with from the industrial scene.
yeah,
Would crop up in his sets and some very new wavy kind of stuff. But Alan Oldham was on a similar tip around about the same time as well, wasn't he, over in Detroit?
yeah.
So there's definite crossovers in those scenes, like new wave as whatever, because obviously a lot is made of the hardcore scene having its roots in hip hop and reggae and sound system culture. There's also that element doesn't actually really get thought about much, does it?
No, for sure. I mean, if you talk about Fabio and Groove Rider, like they openly talk about, and I've seen them chat about this. But when they started, they were playing loads of acid house and disco and funk and stuff like that in the late 80s on Brixton Pirates and stuff like that.
Whatever works on the floor, innit?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was the underground then. I mean, and in one way as well, this is the other thing that people sometimes forget about acid house is that, okay, like it is all about, 303 and like mad squelchy acid and all that sort of stuff. But part of the acid house vibe, particularly the original 87, 88 sort of scene, was about playing a weird, it was the kind of Balearic vibe as well. And
dropping the Water Boys.
Well, yeah, but like, and just some weird records mixed up with stuff,
Funny enough, though, my perception in '91
Yeah.
of the acid house crew from like '88 or whatever was they were sort of really generally dressed in white with a bit of a tan, who looked at us like we were human dirt, dirty little ravers who were like taking all of the soul out of something beautiful they'd created in Ibiza. And I was like, okay. I was kind of discovering that at the same time, because there'd be Saturday nights at the Labyrinth, which we didn't go to. And there was always people like, oh, it's a bit moody, it's a bit housey. And there's some old people there. I was like, well, old, 25, 26. I'm like, all right, But so Labyrinth was like, exposed me to lots of different types of music. And Colin Faver and Colin Dale weren't really, if there was a massive tune, they'd play it, but it didn't really relate to what I was hearing at the Labyrinth, because the Labyrinth was based around kind of what became known as sort of Labyrinth anthems, things that were Billy Bunter would essentially play the same set. Do you know what I mean? For ages, but that's what people wanted. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of times actually the Labyrinth, like me and my sister Stacey, we'd be outside giving out flyers at some points.
Well, there's a video out on YouTube outside the Labyrinth in '91.
Oh, wow.
People just coming out into the daylight looking like they've just been born.
This is what I remember, like, because the last half hour, Billy Bunter's set, we could literally know what tune he's going to play next. And then literally at the end, when did it finish? 7 or something? Was it 7? But anyway, or 6?
6 or 7, yeah.
Yeah, whenever the doors would literally swing open, and there's this massive thing of like, cloud of like sweaty air and like these ravers coming out sweating and chewing
when
their
you first started wearing
chewing their jaws off.
Wear.
Yeah, I mean, we probably
COVID started.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in an early rave. But so you got into the piano hardcore eventually. Then
well, no, I didn't at all. And then fortunately, Colin Dale and Colin Faver started a club which advertised itself as having no chipmunks, no speeded up vocals. That was the selling point for the first night at Knowledge, which was at the SW1 club. I think it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
I think it was Wednesday.
Yeah, it meant that anybody who was going down there was a proper committed lunatic. Yeah,
well, I don't know if I can't remember if we mentioned this last time, but this is what I really remember from back in the day, and the 80s and the 90s, that the proper hardcore crew, and I don't mean just in the music, I just mean hardcore clubbers, whatever way it was, went out in the week. The best clubs are in the week, on a Tuesday, a Wednesday, even a Monday or Thursday for like stuff like Rage and stuff like that. Yeah, they were the best nights in the week. And like I said, like Knowledge on a Wednesday night in Victoria, coming out of there. What?
The SW1, which was
Yeah, the SW.
quite
Yeah.
plush by so compared to Labyrinth and AWOL, you know.
Yeah, maybe compared to Labyrinth. I mean, again, it was kind of a weird place because it had the balcony as well. Wasn't there a big balcony?
Yeah, yeah.
Go up in the balcony. It was quite a, I remember it. I could be totally remembering it wrong, but I remember it was quite a big place. It wasn't tiny.
Yeah, it wasn't small, and it had a pretty decent system in it.
Yeah,
and people played there with the intent to expose people to new music, you know.
Yeah.
And another really cool thing about it was pretty early on in Knowledge's sort of run at the SW1, a fella called Simon Underground, who became a very prolific sort of record distributor and label guy who's still going to this day.
Yeah, Simon's still going strong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shouts to Simon. Yeah,
doing good stuff. Total soldier. Bloody excellent hip hop DJ as well. He used to sell records out of a box down there, and no deck to listen to him or anything. You just like, nod of the head, and and what's this one? And chances are he might even have it in the box.
Yeah.
So I remember picking up PCP 1 and PCP 2 from him, and if anyone's ever heard them by The Mover, well, it kind of makes Your Love by The Prodigy kind of seem a bit redundant if you're into extreme sounds. And at the time, I remember a quite key record in my sort of musical direction. I got played at the Labyrinth. I remember walking into the Labyrinth, and about 2 or 3 songs in, something came out of the speakers, and I was like, what is this? And a couple of days later or whatever, I heard Colin Faber playing it. It's a tune called World Domination by Sysx on Plus 8 Records, yeah?
Yeah.
And it's literally just like a really horrible, like, must be like MS-20 sort of screeching sound with a 909 hammering behind it and nothing else. And it's really paint stripper tune. And I was like, right, why can't it be like this all night kind of thing?
Then the piano came in.
No, and then they dropped Your Love. But I identified within sort of what was going on at the time, the kind of music that I really liked, but I was finding it very, very difficult outside of odd pickups at Knowledge and whatever to get like the records that I wanted. I mean, I remember going down to Black Market for the first time.
Right.
It probably wasn't the best state to go down there in, because we went down there on a Saturday about midday after being however many hours, and going in there and it just being, as you'd imagine, like about 50 people like us gurning behind the in front of the counter, and Vicky and whoever else behind the counter gurning as well.
Ray Keith normally,
hammering tracks, and people going this one, that one, this one, that one, and
like Nicky would just hold a tune up in the air and be like, who wants this?
Exactly.
Like 10 hands going and like, yeah.
And I'd only been in there for about 5 minutes, and he put on this track, and I was like, what is that? Oh, I'm having that. And I bought it. It was a tune called Listen by Adam X, Adam X from...
Yeah, that's I remember that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I was like, this is mental. This is everything. And it's got break beats, and it's got a really hard sort of like, metallic riff going through it. And funnily enough, like, I knew I'd heard it somewhere before, and that New Year's Eve before that, it had been a bit of a mess up with various kind of bookings and stuff. But I'd ended up seeing Kevin Sanderson DJing in Leabridge Road.
Wow.
Of all places. And he played it. Yeah. And it was literally the best tune of the night. So I was like, oh, wow, okay, I managed to get that. But it's funny that...
That wasn't at the Dungeons, was it? Was that at the Dungeons or?
No.
Oh, somewhere else in it.
Believe me, the name didn't reflect the venue. It was a place called the Wonderland Arena,
right? Yeah,
which wasn't at all. It was a knackered old former abattoir or something down at the bottom of Leabridge Road, and the police locked it off until about 5 a.m. For whatever reason, they left then, and the whole car park was just full of people out of their minds. And then they open the doors, and all the DJs and whatever had been sat in their cars waiting because they'd flown over from America. But I might be wrong, but I've got an idea that even Frankie Bones was there as well.
Right.
We were Frost playing.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a bit of a mess. But yeah, that was Elevation, I think. And I think after that, they called all their raves the Payback, and I presume that was to make up for ruining everyone's New Year's Eve for 25 quid or whatever it was. But it wasn't ruined because I got to see Kevin Saunderson and whatever. But anyway, so buying records was tricky. But when I did manage to pick them up, I did. And like Colin Faver and Colin Dale were the source of information, and I started going, okay, well, there's this label that I like, there's that label that I like, and at the time, big labels that I was into, like Rising High was a big thing at the time. The Hypnotist was, they were churning stuff out, licensing stuff from loads of different artists.
Yeah, I mean, the tune I remember, I think it was Colin Dale played, was like the first Aphex Twin, which was on the analog bubble bath, like literally like the Mighty Force One, and he played it, and I remember going down to what was it, Ambient Soho the following day, just going, oh, have you got this record? And yeah, they had it, and I picked that up, and I remember seeing an interview, I think with either Richard or Grant, who runs Reflex, and just saying that, yeah, they dropped off, they come up and they dropped off about 10 copies, around the record stores. So I literally got one of the very first, I've still got it, and it's playing that. I was like, what the fuck is this? Colin Dale would always, like I said, he'd play some stuff which is like more the regular techno, but then he would play just some weird way out there stuff as well.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, there was all kinds of like, interesting sort of, left field, stuff that was influenced by that coming out, wasn't there? I mean, Black Dog were doing really interesting stuff in 91, 92 that he was playing and stuff, but because it wasn't sort of like melt your face off stuff. But Aphex, yeah, totally stood out. Tom got that 12 as well, and it's like, yeah, it was a really interesting time because it was so popular. We're talking about tens of thousands of people going out, that labels like Warp and whatever were able to curate like really kind of good compilations that had exposed you to lots of different artists and take you in different directions. So yeah, but I mean, labels like Reinforced are putting out stuff like Here Comes the Drums by Doc Scott, and the Nebula 2 stuff, which was really sort of techie and banging and stuff. So yeah, I was very into that sort of techno breaks, crossover thing.
Well, yeah, I know, like Digo from Reinforced. I mean, I used to play football with a lot of the Reinforced crew for a little while, and like Digo and all that, they're really into their Detroit techno. Juan Atkins had stayed with him when he was over in London, and they were right into the Detroit stuff as much as the ravey stuff. And I think Digo in particular, he sort of moved away a bit from the ravey stuff, where Mark, like the other guy, For Hero, was more in more a raver, if you like.
Yeah, Total Foundation drum and bass producer with For Hero, with Parallel Universe album.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Yeah,
and For Hero, I mean, they remixed Underground Resistance, didn't they? I mean, yeah, but so yeah, but unfortunately, like the way that it was, because it was such a mass market in this country, things were getting divided up into like jungle and happy hardcore and techno in terms of genres, with clubs and labels and whatever to cater for them, and it was like, my interest sort of lay in the intersection of those things, so I wasn't, so there'd be like specialist shops for specialist types of music, and I'm just trying to learn about everything, or my particular sound in it, and also the fact that I didn't have decks, and I'd come to the end of my stay in London, mid 92 for whatever reason. Summer 92, I've had to move back home for whatever reasons, but I'd become inspired massively by a friend of mine at the time, Rob, who was about from your generation. His name was DJ Double B, and he was a friend of a friend, and he'd been involved in North London warehouse parties with Mr. C, who was mate of his from Holloway, where he lived, and he lived around the corner from Pure Groove Records, and had a good relationship with them. And I'd go in there record shopping with him and stuff, and it'd be always DJ, and he was a very, very technically good DJ. And I think he must have just noticed that of all of our lot, you know, I was the one who was paying most attention to doing it. So he started to sort of go, no, this is how you do this is how you do that. And sort of, he was very quite militant about it, you know, like some hip hop DJs are, you know, and it really sort of sunk in. And I was just in awe of what he was doing. He'd be doing, you know, laying acapellas over instrumentals. He wasn't just like, you know, flipping, you know, fading in and out of breaks and whatever, you know. Because I was like, right, you know, and I'd be just like fumbling just to get, you know, just to get my head around how the whole physics of the thing worked. But anyway, his other brother was selling a pair of SoundLab decks, and I thought, well, might as well. I've got enough records to justify having some decks. I haven't got much to do when I move back home, so I bought these decks and moved back to Hemel, and quite quickly got pretty much booted out of my folks' house because of like the bedroom door vibrating because of my decks being there, and set some decks up at a mate's house, and it quite quickly became like, you know, party central. And living in Hemel, I'd had to try and find, you know, different ways of getting vinyl. Obviously, you know, I'd had a bit of a grounding at buying stuff in London, but I'd been to Black Market, and, you know, going to Pure Groove was relatively easy because it was just a hop and a skip down the M1 and the A1 in the car.
Yeah.
And Camden was a known quantity as well. So I go to Camden Record Shopping and the Exchange. And in Hemel, we had a small independent record shop called the Record Shack that I mentioned in the last episode, which was upstairs, was sort of secondhand records and whatnot, all styles. But because of the sort of boom in rave, some local raver guy had set up a little dance music, like, you know, hardcore basement.
So they were selling some of that stuff then?
Yeah. They were properly on it, because it gets, the Hemel crew get mentioned in Billy Bunter's book. There were lots of people, you know, going up from Hemel to the Labyrinth and to London raving in general, but specifically the Labyrinth, because they were, you know, the Desire, which was like a promoter that span off from Labyrinth, used to do raves down in Plumstead, the Tasco warehouse. You remember it?
Well, I remember it well because obviously that's the area I grew up around.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, horrible place.
Yeah, right next to Belmarsh. Yeah, well, where Belmarsh is now, I don't think Belmarsh was there then, but yeah.
And Mick, who was one of the geezer with the ponytail, the stocky bloke who was part of the Labyrinth, Mick and Phil. Mick used to be the ticket guy, so he used to sell the tickets for their raves, and Record Shack was a ticket outlet for Desire.
Okay, yeah.
So we'd get all the London ticket people, all rain dance and whatever, would all bring their tape packs and all of their tickets and promos and records, because a lot of them were running record labels at the time. You know, I think Labyrinth for a while had a label, but various labels were attached to these ticket people. So there's an influx of ravers and rave culture into Hemel. I mean, you know, and all over and stuff. So they'd be getting in, like, you know, promos, as well as, you know, the hardcore, which was just, you know, whatever breakbeat hardcore was coming in. They'd be getting pretty much any underground independent dance music. They'd be getting a couple of white labels of it.
Yeah.
So I'd just be able to go in there and just go through whatever box they'd got in, right? And I remember going in there one point in time, they were like, "You'll like this one," and putting it on, it being, I think it was Nightmares of Reality by Sea Tank in 1992.
Yeah, well, they obviously knew you well then. Exactly.
Well, yeah, it's utterly brutal, kind of like, you know, proto industrial gabber. It's amazing. But they were just like, "What speed does this go on, mate?" And I was like, "I think you can play it at both speeds quite happily," kind of thing.
Well, here's the thing, though. The distributors were really getting the records out there, weren't they? Like you said, like the vans were really going out and spreading these records. It was a massive sort of thing. They were shifting decent numbers as well. So
totally, I was the one guy in Hemel who bought Praxis 1 and Praxis 1 remixes. Do you know what I mean? Because they made it up there. You know, I was getting all kinds of stuff. And so yeah, I was going up to London and obviously doing that. And there was a couple of other independent record shops around. There was one up in Aylesbury, I think, and that. And you know, you just kind of do the rounds of these places. Yeah, so I didn't really have much of a clue about like where to go in London at the time. Yeah, because I'm living back in Emerald and haven't got much sort of access, sort of information about where to go. So, like, what were the best places, or what were the go-to shops for, like, for non sort of commercial, for want of a better word, like, music at that time?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the first place to start really for some of the shops for me were like I guess towards the end of the 80s, like 89, 90. Like my sister Stacey had started playing on Fantasy FM, which was, kind of like if not the biggest pirate radio in London at that time. And her and her friend Dean were running a record store down at the Covered Market in Woolwich, and this must be like 1991, round about that sort of time.
So Fantasy was the South London station.
I can't remember exactly where they broke. Fantasy just basically was all over London. You could hear it. They had they had a decent transmitter that pretty much most people listened to Fantasy all over London. It wasn't really specific to one area. Like they did have like really good transmitters. So yeah, Stacey and Dean, they ran like basically like a record store in Woolwich, Covered in Market. It probably is 91, I think. And they used to get like loads of the early hardcore that I used to, and I used to pick it up from them. And as well as them, there was actually my friend Terry Mitchell used to do a little stall in Woolwich with his then girlfriend Addie, and they used to sell a bit more of the techno-y stuff. They were a bit more on the techno stuff. I mean, I got some good old Transmat and all that sort of stuff. Terry, and like, yeah, he was more. They were more into that the housey techno sort of stuff. And yeah, Stacey and Dean were just.
I mean, when I first met Terry Mitchell in sort of about 94, 95, and he was like proper Detroit stalwart,
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I mean, Terry was definitely more into that sort of side of the scene. So yeah, like you said before, I was all over the shop. I mean, this is the thing about all the music. I was into the hardcore coming out, but I was also into the weird techno and the experimental stuff. Like we said, I'd been growing up with the new wave stuff and hip hop stuff. I was into it all really. So again, I was getting all this stuff from all different places. But yeah, I was buying loads of records from Stacey's stall, and yeah, I remember at that time, I basically I'll just dip into a bit here because it's a longer story for another time. But basically, like my friend Joel, who I'd met in New York at the end of the 80s, and
Deadly Buddha.
Yeah, Deadly Buddha. He's old graffiti artist, and he basically he'd come over when I was, we talked earlier on how, like, I think it was 88, 89, I was living in Finsbury Park, and he'd come over to visit me. And I think I'd taken him down to Club Dog. And actually, like, funny enough, talking about record stores, Quaff Records was in Stroud Green Road then, around the corner for me. And I used to get loads of early acid house records from there. Like, that's the first place it was, I believe. But anyway, Joel would come over to visit me, like, because I first met him in New York in like 88, 87, 88. He come over to visit me in London, 88, 89. And we kept in touch and all that. And I'd taken him to some like early sort of housey sort of parties, early rave sort of stuff. And basically at 91, he messaged me just basically saying, right, basically I'm going to do the first ever rave in Pittsburgh. I'm going to fly you over, and I'm going to be DJ Deadly Buddha, and you're going to be DJ Controlled Weirdness. That's
Pittsburgh's where he's from.
Yeah, that's originally where he's from. I mean, he's in Subway art and Spray Can art, which is like
yeah. The thing is when I met Joe, I presume just because he looked like a surfer dude, with long blonde hair, I thought he was from California. I just imagined him going back to some like super sunny place and jumping on his surfboard, but no, he's actually from industrial Pittsburgh.
There's not a lot of surfing in Pittsburgh. Yeah,
good graph artist though, very good at graph artist.
Yeah, well, like when I met him in New York, that was his thing, the graph thing, and he was actually mates with Henry. He knew Henry Chalfont, and he knew some of the legendary early graph artists. He met all them. But yeah, so basically, like, he was like, I'm going to fly you over. We're going to do this rave. And like I said, that's where I got my name, Controlled Weirdness, from. He was like, I'm Deadly Buddha, and you're Controlled Weirdness. And I took like a big box of records over there, and they were pretty much all the hardcore that I'd been buying. Some from Stacey's, Stacey's shop that she was doing with Dean, and some of the other rave shops in London. And basically, for about 6 months, we were doing these, rave parties in Pittsburgh. The first one we did on this old fireman's building on the edge of town, we had like 1,000 people turn up to this party, just out of nowhere, and quite a legendary party in that area, sort of kick-starting this sort of scene. And there's actually, I think there's one book, I can't remember what it's called, that's talking about the early rave scene in America. And they actually say in there like that basically like Neil Keating, Controlled Weirdness, come over to Pittsburgh with this box of records that he got from his sister's record shop in London and started playing all these rave tunes and blah, blah, blah. We had people, I know one of the young kids who used to come our party was, he basically, he turned into Diesel Boy. I know the parties we did, that was the first exposure he heard, and I've seen some interviews with him saying about coming to the parties, and he heard me playing all these records that obviously they were like all these weird white labels and like early, hardcore rave records that, had, not really gotten over to Pittsburgh. And yeah, so for that time, for that early part, I was in the States doing these parties pretty much from 91 just coming into 92. And I actually cut the week I come back, I think it was May 92, I flew back to London. Pretty much my visa had run out. I'd been doing these parties down in New Orleans. We did like the first raves in New Orleans, and that's a whole other story because one of them was doing a riot and all sorts of stuff. But I'll save them stories for another time because I could go on for hours about what happened down there. But basically, I come back in May 92, and my sister Stacey, she was like, "Oh, yeah, shame you didn't come back last week because we went to this like amazing party. It was like Castle Morton, this place called Castle."
Oh, right.
So I literally come back like a week after Castle Morton. So I kind of wish I had come a week before. But, obviously I heard all the stories about Castle Morton and then started getting into a bit more, if you like, the free party sort of scene, the Spiral Tribe sort of scene. But yeah, you're talking about the sort of record shops that I was going to. So the big one for that time for me up in Soho was Unity Records was the one that I'd go on a Friday pretty much with my wages. I was doing a bit of temping work, and I'd pretty much spend anywhere up to about 100 quid, most of my wages just on these white labels from, behind the counter. That it was mostly Derek at Unity would just pull out all these records for me. And
Unity were they sold like full spectrum of stuff like house and hardcore and techno and
they sold the variety of stuff, they sold the mixture. I think when I was going there, it was very on the ravey sort of tip. So I did get some housey techno-y stuff there as well, but it was kind of the era, like we were saying about, the records you'd get out in Hemel and in the shop in Hemel, like the vans would be turning up and they'd be like, there'd be white labels, releases non-stop, so I think like you said about like the first time you went to Black Market, there definitely was, if you like, there was kind of a pecking order in some of the record stores. Like it almost was like,
oh yeah, that was a right obstacle for me, obviously from being that sort of outside of London and not having any sort of links to anybody within London. I always felt like I was like missing out on stuff that was available. Do you know what I mean? But like I said, I was in Hemel and nobody I knew was into playing what I was into playing. There were other DJs, but they were very much going into the sort of Hemel, like I said, was a sort of rave town. Yeah. So it sadly settled on the happy hardcore sort of branch of it rather than the drum and bass jungle side of things. So most of the sort of, I guess it was sort of next generation of people that were going out in their late teens, because we're all edging into our early 20s now. We're going out to happy hardcore dues. And our local sound system was Exodus, who, we'd go to quite a lot, go to Exodus parties all the time. And whilst the event of going to an Exodus party was absolutely brilliant, massive long convoys, thousands of people in a quarry, massive sound system, absolutely quintessential sort of like free party experience, massive, really tight, pretty unfriendly, hostile crew. Exodus were, especially if you weren't like from Luton or wherever. But unfortunately, they played pretty dreadful music. Like, they'd start off like the night with a couple of like banging jungle tunes, and then quickly it'd get into sort of cheesy happy hardcore with a load of people from Luton in like dressed to the nines up to their ankles in mud.
Yeah, well, there was that weird sort of, there was that crossover period. Like, so yeah, the 91, 92, yeah, the hardcore was coming out, like you said, it was like some amazing sort of tunes. And yeah, I guess 92, 93, even 94, it did start splitting off a bit into that. You had the cheesy rave stuff, and then you had the people were more into, I
mean, if you go to AWOL in 92, you were just getting serious, like long, dark tunnels with Randall and Kenny Ken, and it was like properly clattering amens, which is excellent, really, really cool music. But I wanted to hear a right mix-up of stuff, and and also in a vibe that wasn't getting sort of increasingly hostile in clubs, in London.
Yeah, I don't know. I used to go AWOL all the time. I used to love it.
I loved going to AWOL because I remember once coming out of the Scala cinema at 7 a.m, out of my face, and thinking, I can't be bothered to go home. Walking up to AWOL, going into AWOL at like 7:30 in the morning and staying till midday. Like,
is this when it was up at Angel, the one round the back?
Yeah, what became whatever it is, the Carling Arena now or something.
Yeah, well, because weirdly, that venue, I remember when I first lived in that area in the mid-80s, I'd gone with like a friend of mine, and it was like some weird gay club. Like we ended up there in 87 or something. There's virtually no one in there, and just some random club you end up at. And then like a few years later, that's where AWOL was. And it was just...
Well, yeah, and a couple of years after that, I saw Jeff Mills for the first time there in 94.
Yeah.
And by which time it had changed its name to Complex.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, do you remember? Anyway.
Yeah, you said Complex earlier on, and I couldn't remember where that was. But yeah, that was...
Yeah.
Yeah, because this was the other thing. The venues kept changing their names, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean... Yeah. I mean, the Rocket was a funny one, because that stayed as a venue for years and years, and that was just some university sort of premises on Holloway Road, which for whatever reason at the weekend they just host these like totally excessive parties, all kinds of different things at the Rocket. Always pretty rubbish sound system, but yeah. So it was going into record shops was pretty daunting. I used to prefer to go into places like Pure Groove, which weren't super busy, where they were really actually just interested in shifting stock rather than sorting out whoever, and they'd still get the same stuff by distributors, and it went out on the racks,
No, for sure.
Simon Underground used to have a whole section, at the end of the door, by when you used to walk in the door at Pure Groove, it'd be like literally like 150, 200 records, that all had little underground music stickers on them in like 92, 93 of like, early, like, anything really banging and nasty. And good would be in there. And they were, they were into their techno and sort of D-Jax stuff. I'd get up there as well. Stuff, early D-Jax and whatnot. And I was just, really into loads of stuff. And like I said, Eurobeat 2000 was very, they had a label going at the same time as the club, which again would like turn you on to lots of different artists. And Rising High were releasing all these compilations which would like turn you on to different artists and stuff. And I'd sussed out by now that Underground Resistance were someone that you just basically had to buy everything that was on that label, and it was just a matter of tracking them down and getting them.
Thanks, Ian. We'll stop there for this episode, but join us next time for the third and final part of our chat. We'll discuss the importance of the free party scene, some infamous underground sound systems, and some early 2000s vinyl releases.